Hi, and welcome back to Pages and Projects with Liz. Today I have a reading wrap up for the month of April where I'm going to go over the 18 books that I read this month. The first book I read was a library book, A Serial Killer's Guide to Marriage by Asia Mackay. That one I gave 3 stars to. It sounded really interesting. So it's two former serial killers. They had gotten married, had a baby, and sort of getting that itch to go back to killing. Um, so I thought it was going to be really funny to read through, and there were parts that I really liked, but then other pieces just dragged on. Again, a lot of the miscommunication kinds of tropes, and I just wished that they had settled up some of the pieces a lot earlier. For two people that met through crime and were able to hide it for so long, they were really stupid at times too with what they were going through. So it was a fine book. Glad that it was something that I checked out from the library and not something that I wound up paying for, because I'd probably end up unhauling that. Next up, I have A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This book I gave 4 stars to. This one is a special edition from Owl Crate. This book is a retelling of the Brothers Grimm Goose Girl story. So, not super accurate to that story, but a really fun retelling. I enjoy a lot of T. Kingfisher's books. I enjoy a good storytell reimagining. And so this was awesome. I really loved it. So happy that I wound up getting it in a subscription box. Definitely one of the books that I really, really enjoyed from this. And if you enjoy retellings, would very much recommend this book. Next up, I have First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. This book I gave 3 stars to. It's a Book of the Month book. I got it as one of the award winners, so it's not one that I initially selected when it came out. It's not one that I would necessarily have used my credit on, but people were raving about it, and so I went ahead and selected it as my freebie book. I don't know. I think in general, I'm just not super into romance stories. I do enjoy, romance within a fantasy story, oftentimes, but there's just, I don't know, something really cheesy and predictable about a lot of romance stories. This one I thought was pretty cute. So you've got a radio host, and this woman's daughter calls in about her mom, and the two of them, end up talking. Fairly predictable what's going to end up happening. It is part of a series, so there are more books that will follow other characters from this. I just feel like it dragged on too much. So, it is decent size for a romance, so 420 pages. And it felt like it could have been shorter. There were just moments that took forever to get through, especially again when you know what's going to end up happening. There aren't any surprises to it. And so again, it was fine. I'm glad that I read it to see what that hype was and kind of reaffirm that it's not for me. I have some more romances that I want to go through just because I happen to have had them for a while, but I'm feeling like at this point, other than a couple of authors, that most of these are just going to end up being 3 stars. I do enjoy Emily Henry books. There, again, if I read a ton of them in a row, I might not. So if you have any romance authors that you would recommend that maybe would fit what I'm looking for a little bit more, I would love some recommendations, because it does sound like such a fun, sweet area to be reading. I've been getting a lot of misses for me personally so far. Next, I read the Inheritance Game series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So I read 4 books from this. So the Inheritance Games, the Hawthorne Legacy, the Final Gambit, and the Brothers Hawthorne. There is another series that's come out in this world, and I'm not interested in continuing on it. I gave the first 3 books 4 stars. But the Brothers Hawthorne, I only gave 3 stars, and that's where my interest in that series definitely tapered off. With this series, you have a teenager who is named in the will of a billionaire, and she has to go and live in the house for a year in order to claim that inheritance. There's a lot of family members that aren't sure why on earth she was named in the will. There's a lot of games and puzzles to solve for different components. And so it was a fun premise. And I thought some of the games and puzzles, even though for some of them you as the reader couldn't solve it because you don't know everything in the house or all of the named areas, you could still get kind of an idea that certain components were going to come up later. And so there were some pieces that were a little predictable. There's a little romance in it. And so it was a cute series, and it was a young adult series, and I think I would have loved it even more when I was that age, and that might be why I gave the first 3 4 stars, is just thinking about like younger Liz would have absolutely loved that whole series. But it's another one where I think it just started to drag out at a certain point. Like, I was nice for a couple of the books, really being able to get to know the characters, and then it was sort of like TV shows where like a lot of the crime ones, like who's gonna get attacked this time, what serial killer is gonna pop up, and who's gonna be in danger, where it just got a little too samey, and a lot that went on within the span of what was supposed to be a year, plus a little bit extra with that final book. So again, glad I read through it. It was a series that I've owned for a while on my Kindle, and a series that I can check off, because to me it is finished. I am not continuing on in that world at all. Next up, I have Bonkers by Jennifer Saunders. And this book I gave 4 stars to, which again is what I rate pretty much every memoir. This was really cute. This is the last memoir I have where the author has an audiobook version that they've narrated themselves. So I did listen to that. Again, I really enjoy a lot of these when the author is narrating it. If it's someone else narrating it, I just read it physically. And I have 2, I think, memoirs left from when I binge purchased a whole bunch a couple years back. But those are narrated by someone else, so I will just be reading them physically. But there's something about the stories when you got the actual person sharing it. It feels more like you're just having a conversation with an old friend, catching up. So this is another British actress that I had seen a lot of things when I was younger that she starred in, especially Absolutely Fabulous. Watched that all the time with my mom. So it was, again, just really fun hearing more about her and her life, and some things that I had no idea about because I didn't and still don't tend to follow celebrities' personal lives. So It was really cute. I'm glad that I read it, and again, glad to have checked off another memoir from my TBR backlist. Next, I have Lady Tremaine by Rachel Hochhauser. This book I gave 5 stars to. So this is a book of the month pick of mine. It is a Cinderella retelling, and I just really, really enjoyed this. As I mentioned before, I enjoy a good retelling, especially when it's not a very predictable version where it's just, oh, the the villain was just misunderstood. This is a little bit of that because the villain is the one being highlighted in this, but there was enough different where it wasn't 100% scene for scene recreation. Definitely different vibes for the prince in this story versus Cinderella. And so this is a book that I really enjoyed, and I'm glad that I read it so soon after purchasing it and didn't let it sit around. So the goals that I've set are definitely getting me through more books this year and keeping up on things and reading it while I'm in the moment of really enjoying it. So again, another book would highly recommend, especially if you enjoy retellings of fairy tales. Next, I have The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. This is another Owl Crate book from this year. This one I gave 4 stars to. I really, really liked this. You have a character who is a young woman from a farming family, and she gets herself selected to be a contender to be a concubine. And so very interesting story. There's some magic in this world. There's a lot of people that end up dying. I don't want to give too much away, but I definitely thought that this was going to turn into a really stereotypical romance, where everything would work out in one particular way and be super predictable and changed people, and we all have a full understanding of everything. And if that was the case, I definitely wouldn't have rated it as high. I like how this ended. I like where it left us off with the characters, and certainly not the kind of ending that you might expect if you go into it thinking it's one particular type of book. Again, I don't want to spoil it because that ending piece, what happens, was just so good, because I wasn't expecting it. I really thought it was going to map out a different way. So would highly recommend this book too. Next, I have The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields, and this was a Fairy Loot backlist book, so not from this year. It was a cute book. This book I gave 3 stars to. This is one where, it was supposed to be cozy fantasy, witchy. You've got a character in here who becomes the Honey Witch, but one of the pieces of being the Honey Witch is that they're cursed when it comes to love. I really liked some of the representations of love. Again, interesting mix with the time period, similar to the Jane Austen murder mysteries, where you've got some components that are really subverting what you would see for typical relationships and gender expectations, but then there's other components of the story that are very normative for that. So an interesting mix. What I didn't really love was the pacing. You spend so much of the book with like the threat of this problem, um, and really following a certain small group of characters for quite a while. And then by the time the action does happen, it's at the very, very end of the book and it feels very rushed. So it's just such a slow pacing for all of the beginning portion, giving it far more just cozy fantasy vibes. And then it was like they realized that they needed to kick it into overdrive to get the attack and that whole component. And again, it was just escalated very quickly, wrapped up very quickly, and that really hampered my enjoyment of it. So I thought it was a fine book, but again, just a 3-star for me. Next, I have Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan. This is also a fairy loot backlist book for me, and another one where I gave this book 4 stars. I really liked this. It reminded me of a lot of manga I've read where character from one world ends up going into another world, whether that's, you know, a movie, a story, a video game. Here it's from a book series, and they wind up reliving part of that character, knowing what happened in the book, and needing to try to change it up a bit. And then especially the fact that it was a villain. So I have certainly read several manga with that kind of premise, and I think this one did it really well. So I really liked the character in this. I liked the fact that she didn't remember everything from the whole series. I like that you find out that there are potentially more people from the real world in here, and the kinds of changes that they're making that backfire at times. So it's not just all perfect. This is also in a series. The other book for it comes out this year, and I cannot wait to read that one. This one ends at such a rough point that I really just wanted to jump right into the next book. And unfortunately, it's not out, I think, for another couple of months. So, really enjoyed this. Cannot wait for the next book to come out in this series and continue on and find out what happens with everyone. Next, I have Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, and this book I gave 3 stars to. This is a book on AI. I follow a lot of things that Ethan Mollick has written, and this is another book similar to a previous one I read a month or two ago, where I think if I had read this in the earlier stages of AI, I would have liked it a lot more, and I think that is definitely the target audience. If you are kind of unfamiliar with AI and some of the principles and ideas of it, I think this is a good read. I think he wrote about it very well. He uses some good examples to walk through, has a couple of prompts in here, and it's all written without being too technical. My issue is just he's got 4 principles in here, and they're things that I already know and have known for quite a while, so it wasn't much new in this, except just, you know, here's a different way of explaining it to somebody else. And so that part was pretty good. I did tab it a bit so that I could still use it as a work reference, but again, another book where I think I just wasn't the right audience for this. And if you are newer in exploring AI still, and about the strengths and potential weaknesses of it, and just sort of like that evolving relationship that people have with AI, I think this would still be good. if you've been working with AI for a while, if you know all about it, you use it regularly, I don't think that this particular book is for you. Next, I have You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. This book I gave 4 stars to. This was another book of the month pick. This is one that I was concerned could go horribly wrong. One of the characters, one of the children in here has autism. And in a previous career life, I worked in disability services. And one of the things that I noticed with a lot of early media was that they just stereotyped the hell out of everything. So it would be, the idea that autism is a spectrum. People are very different within that spectrum. But there was a time period where a lot of the literature just took like every big stereotype and glued it all into one character. And so it just was too over the top and not realistic at all. I don't think that was the case with this. I think the representation was better, especially, again, trying not to go through any spoilers, especially when you find out some of the things that has been happening to the child. And so what is based off of those happenings, what is up to the autism diagnosis. You've got a house with this family living in it, and so some spooky things happening and stuff going wrong in their lives. And again, that idea of, is it the house? Is the house haunted? Is it something to do with the family in there? Is it a combination? This just seems to be an area of literature that I enjoy, because there's been quite a few books in the past few years I feel like I've read where there's a house and it's not necessarily known at the beginning if it's haunted or not. And I'd say in the books I've been reading, part of the time it is a haunting, part of the time there's another explanation for it. So this I think was good. I think some of the parts, with any mystery thriller, some of the parts you can predict, but there were enough twists or just things that weren't 100% what I was expecting that definitely kept me engaged, and I really wanted to finish it quickly and find out what had happened. So again, another enjoyable read. Next up, I have another long time Kindle read, 14 Days, an Unauthorized Gathering by a variety of authors. Margaret Atwood was an editor for it. With this book, it's set during COVID and the lockdown. You have an apartment complex and you have the residents sharing stories of their lives. So they're getting together in the evening on the rooftop and just taking turns sharing stories. I thought the idea of it was interesting, having different authors telling the stories from these different characters. So everyone's voice is a little different, but it also makes sense and it's very fitting. Not everyone would share a story in the same way. But also I thought it dragged out. And I did forget to say, I gave this one 2 stars. So the idea was good. I just didn't end up enjoying most of the stories. It wasn't a super long book, but it just felt like it dragged on it a bit. The ending and what had happened to everyone was a little interesting, but at that point I was pretty checked out because it just, again, was a lot with some of the stories. I think if there had been more components to it, it would have been interesting, or if they had tightened it up and maybe got rid of some of the stories, it would have hit better for me. It just, the pacing was off. It was like all of the things that I don't enjoy from a lot of short story collections merged into something that wasn't a short story collection. So this one I think might have been a Kindle Unlimited book. I didn't pay for it either way, so fine, but it was not for me. Kind kind of wish that I hadn't continued on to read it, but I just was expecting it to get a lot better. And like I said, some of the authors in there were authors that I enjoyed, but it just didn't really hit right for me. Next, I have Sinister Spring by Agatha Christie. This one I gave 4 stars to, and this would be an example of a short story collection that I do enjoy. So, another seasonal book with a series of short stories, some featuring characters that I know from longer books, some were ones that I knew nothing about. And again, like I realized with the winter one, I spread these out. So I read a story or 2 at a time and read it slowly throughout the entire month. And I really enjoyed it. Some of the stories I liked more than others. Some of them are frustrating in a way that because they're a short story and you don't have all of the information, they're not really what I'd see as a fair play mystery. Like there's not enough information for you to be able to solve it. And I do prefer that with mysteries. I like for me to have the opportunity to figure out who did it. And certainly for some of these, you needed to have knowledge that was not shared until later on. But even with that, overall, really enjoyed the stories. There were a couple that were by far my favorites. And again, I'm looking forward to reading the last 2 in this series, which will be the summer and the fall books. Next up, I have Vathek by William Beckford. This one I gave 3 stars to, and I'm a little disappointed in that. So this is a classic where someone is given the opportunity for treasure and power, but is going to need to make some sacrifices. And oh boy, does he have no problem sacrificing children and other people, and just kind of madness from there. So this is a Gothic literature classic. It's one of the early ones. I enjoy a lot of Gothic literature, and I'm thinking that maybe I enjoy it perhaps a bit more from certain time period. This was just, I don't know, it was a little bit clunkier to get through. Part of it could be the formatting of this edition with where they put any of the notes at the end. So if you did want to read a bit more for one of the sections to get the context, it was a lot more flipping back and forth. I was trying to tab it because I am trying to annotate more for some of these classics so that I can do some comparisons and see where there are similarities with different stories between classic Gothic literature and some more modern Gothic literature. But I didn't get through much with this. This is certainly one that I do want to, as much as I'm saying, like, it was only a 3-star and everything for me, I do want to read it again. And I think this has the potential to be something that I enjoy more on the second read. And that's just something that I found with certain classics when I was doing my undergraduate literature degree, that the first pass through, when you are looking at a lot of the footnotes and the explanations and trying to figure out some of the historical context, you slog through the rest of the writing, and especially when it's written in a different time period, so not as modern for just some of the wording choices. And so there were certainly some books that when I read it the first time through, I kind of missed some of those pieces because I was trying to do that close reading, look back and forth at the notes. And so I want to give this some time. I don't want to reread it right away, but I do certainly want to revisit it. And I even left my little stickies and my guide as to what I think I'm going to do for different colors based off of what I knew from the themes of the book, to do a second pass. And maybe at that point I will enjoy it more and bump it back up. But for right now, first pass through it, while there were some parts that I liked, I just not enough to do more than 3 stars at this point. And then the final book I read this month was another Kindle Unlimited book, trying to, get my money's worth out of that subscription. I might not keep that after this year. It's definitely been some rough books that haven't been worth it. But the book I read was Murder at the Highland Games by D. MacDonald. That book I gave 4 stars to. It's part of the Allie McKinley mystery series. So it's book number 4, and that one was another one that got me caught up to where that series is currently. There's another book coming out, I believe, in October. So when that comes out, I'll read it. It's a cute, murder mystery series with a woman who's in her 70s. She's a widow. She winds up moving into another small town in Scotland to run a bed and breakfast, and every book there is some kind of issue that pops up, and then she winds up being part of the investigation. So I don't know that you would necessarily want to stay at her bed and breakfast, because you do have a high chance of being murdered from what it has turned out so far. But it's a fun series. I've said before, I don't know that it is necessarily the most well-written, brilliant piece of literature, but I still really enjoy it. It ticks so many of the boxes of what I like to read. And so easily all the books in that series so far have been 4 stars for me. They're my fun fluff kind of reading. The characters are funny. It's, you're invested in how they're going on in their lives. And so really just enjoyable. So a nice way to wrap up the month of April with that one. And so there you have it, the 18 books that I read in the month of April between these and the Kindle books. Again, pretty good reading month, trying to go through my TBR. I'm hoping to get a lot of reading done in May. Taking advantage of enjoying all of this and not being in a reading slump while I can. I'd love to know what your favorite book was that you read for the month of April. I'd also like to know if you read any of these, what did you think? Were there any that I enjoyed that you didn't like, or any that I didn't rate so high that you enjoyed? Love to have a conversation about your books that you've been reading down in the comments. So thank you, and I will see you in my next video.